The series opens with a team of officers pulling a car out of a lake, and when they open the trunk, they discover the body of a teenage girl tied up and murdered in a brutal way. Then the story jumps back in time, and we see a teenage girl named Rosie running through the forest, trying to escape someone who's chasing her, and it's clear she's terrified. Back in the present, Detective Sarah arrives at the lake and notices something strange near the shore. When she gets closer, she finds a dead animal. Right then, Sarah gets a call from the police and heads to a dock-like location where an officer tells her that a homeless man found a body of a teenage girl with no ID. Sarah goes inside alone. The place is dark and creepy, and she walks carefully toward the body, noticing blood stains along the way. She reaches the room where the body is hanging in a strange way and moves closer to examine it. Suddenly, her colleagues appear and start singing, and Sarah realizes it's just a prank her coworkers pulled to celebrate her before she transfers to another city. Sarah goes home and sees Rick, her boyfriend. She asks about her son Jack, and Rick says he dropped him at school. Sarah asks if he's still upset, and Rick explains that Jack is only 13. And of course he's upset about their relationship, but he'll get used to it. Sarah asks about the moving company that's supposed to relocate their stuff, and Rick tells her they'll arrive in an hour, and that her friend Reggie called, saying she'll take Jack on a boat trip before they move. Before Rick leaves, he asks Sarah if she's really ready to sell her apartment, quit her job, and pull her son away from his friends just to get married. Sarah tells him she's sure. Later, Sarah heads to her office to gather her things before leaving. The new detective, Holder, comes in. He's the one taking her office and apologizes because he didn't realize she hadn't moved out yet. Sarah assures him she's almost done and will head out soon. Then the captain, Oakes, walks in and asks Sarah to go check out a crime scene at Discovery Park. Sarah is confused and reminds him that this is her last day and she's leaving tonight. But Oakes tells her her shift ends at 6, which means she's still on duty. He tells her to go and take Holder so she can show him how to work a crime scene. Sarah and Holder arrive at the crime scene and meet a patrol officer. Sarah asks about the body, and the officer says they're still looking and hands her the victim's clothes, explaining that a group of students found them in the morning. Holder suggests the park could be a place where addicts or sex workers bring clients. Sarah tells him the victim isn't an addict. Her clothes are clearly freshly washed, and addicts don't usually take their clothes to the cleaners. She asks the officer if he found any other evidence. The officer shows her a bank card with the name Stanley on it. Holder assumes the girl was a sex worker, and the card fell from Stanley while he was with her. Meanwhile, we see Stanley at his moving company job with his coworker Belko, moving a shipment. Stanley gets a call from his wife Mitch, asking him to come home quickly. He returns home and starts fixing a plumbing leak that flooded the house. Mitch insists the faucet will stay broken no matter how much tape he wraps around it. Stanley explains he doesn't have the money to replace it and promises Belko will fix it later. He turns on the faucet to check it, and it sprays him in the face. Mitch laughs, and we see they're a happy family. Meanwhile, mayoral candidate Darren is at a cemetery when he gets a call from his campaign manager, Jamie. Darren heads to campaign headquarters where he meets Jamie and Gwen, who we learn is his love interest. Jamie and Gwen brief him about his opponent, Adams, and warn him that Adams is closing the gap between them in the race. During the meeting, Darren tells them he spoke with Councilwoman Ross, and she told him she'll endorse him. Jamie is thrilled and sees it as a huge win for their campaign. Back on the other side of the story, Sarah and Holder arrive at Stanley's house and speak to Mitch. They ask for Stanley, and Mitch tells them he's at work. Sarah asks where he was last night, and Mitch says he was home with their kids. He always stays with them, especially yesterday, because they got home late from a camping trip. Sarah leaves her card and asks Mitch to have Stanley call when he gets home. Suddenly, Sarah notices a bike and suspects it belongs to a teenage girl around the same age as the murdered victim. She asks Mitch if she has a teenage daughter. Mitch says yes. Her name is Rosie, and she didn't go on the camping trip. She spent the weekend with her friend. Sarah asks when Mitch last talked to Rosie. Worry starts spreading on Mitch's face as she says she last heard from her on Friday before they left for the trip. Meanwhile, Rosie's friend Sterling arrives at school and asks classmates if anyone has seen Rosie. In class, she sends Rosie a text asking where she is. The principal walks in and asks about Rosie. Sterling steps outside with the principal and Mr. Bennett and says Rosie spent the weekend with her, but didn't come to school because she left early. As she's talking, Sterling suddenly gets a nosebleed and says it happens to her a lot. The principal leaves and asks Mr. Bennett to get the students ready for the mayoral candidate's visit. Bennett asks Sterling to tell him the truth. Back to Sarah and Holder, questioning Mitch about Rosie. Mitch explains that Rosie left Friday to go to a Halloween party and then went to stay with Sterling. Sarah asks if Rosie ever ran off before or had any fights with her. Sarah is surprised Mitch didn't hear from Rosie the whole weekend. Mitch insists they had no problems and she couldn't contact Rosie because the camping spot had no reception. Meanwhile, Sterling goes to Chris, Jasper's friend, and asks him about Jasper. She tells him that Rosie is missing and the police are looking for her, and she's scared Rosie might be in trouble. Chris tells her that Jasper is at the old house on the island and that his parents are out of town. Sterling asks if Rosie is with him, and Chris says Jasper will definitely take advantage of his parents being gone, so Rosie is probably there with him. A little later, we see Mitch trying to call Stanley. At that moment, her kids arrive with their Aunt Terry and ask where Rosie is, since she promised to take them bike riding. When the kids go inside, Terry asks Mitch if there's any news about Rosie. Mitch says there isn't, and she's upset that Stanley won't answer his phone. Terry asks what the police said, and Mitch tells her they just asked routine questions. Then Rosie's brothers come in and ask about her again, and Mitch snaps at them unintentionally. Terry jumps in and promises she'll take them out instead. Mitch apologizes to Terry for losing her temper and says she's going to punish Rosie badly when she comes back. Terry tries to calm her and reassures her that Rosie will return. After a bit, Stanley comes home and tries to comfort Mitch, who's extremely worried after talking to the detectives. Stanley asks about Jasper, thinking Rosie might be with him, but Mitch tells him Rosie broke up with Jasper last summer. Stanley tries to reassure her and promises he'll look for Rosie himself. Sarah and Holder arrive at the lake, and the search team manages to pull a car out of the water. At the same moment, Stanley calls Mitch and tells her Rosie wasn't at Jasper's house and says he's heading to the park since the police found her clothes there. Suddenly, Stanley sees a large group of officers blocking the road. He gets out of the car, panicking, trying to understand what's going on, and when the officers stop him, he starts yelling Rosie's name. Right then, Sarah opens the trunk of the car and is stunned to find Rosie's body tied up and brutally murdered, with clear signs of assault. Sarah walks over to Stanley and tells him he isn't supposed to be here. Stanley realizes the body they found is his daughter and collapses in shock. On the other side, Mitch hears what's happening and completely loses control, calling out to Stanley to tell her what's going on. Sarah returns to Holder, and he tells her they ran the car's plates and confirmed the vehicle belonged to mayoral candidate Darren's campaign. Rosie's body is taken to the morgue, where her parents arrive to identify her. Stanley holds himself together, while Mitch can't even look at the body. Sarah begins questioning Stanley, while Holder questions Mitch, asking about Rosie's friends, her life, and whether she had any political connections. Stanley insists Rosie was a quiet girl who stayed close to her siblings and never had issues with anyone. Sarah and Holder go to the school to question Sterling and Jasper. Suddenly, Jasper's father arrives and informs Sarah she has no right to question his son without a lawyer present. After she leaves, Jasper's father slaps him and demands to know what he did this time. Sarah returns to the office and reviews the Halloween party footage, which shows nothing suspicious. Then Oakes walks in and tells them Jasper was arrested last April for stealing his neighbor's car, but the charges were dropped. Sarah says that's not surprising, since Jasper's father owns half the island. Oakes asks about Darren, and Holder tells him they confirmed Darren's alibi and checked his campaign staff's records. No criminal background and no allegations involving minors. Holder is convinced Jasper is the one responsible, since all the evidence points to him. Oakes tells them that Darren is holding a press conference in an hour. Meanwhile, Darren arrives at his office, and Jim tells him that the private investigator confirmed all employee records are clean, and reassures him that the car used in the murder was reported stolen on Saturday. Holder meets two of Rosie's classmates and convinces them to smoke with him. He gains their trust and learns that students often hold parties in the school basement. Holder rushes there and starts searching the basement. At the same time, Oakes enters Sarah's office and hands her the autopsy report. He tells her Rosie was still alive when she was tied up and died by drowning when the car sank into the lake. Her fingernails broke while she was trying to escape, and they still can't determine yet whether she was sexually assaulted. Sarah closes the report and tells him she's leaving. Oakes says he approves and will send someone to drive her and her son. When Sarah steps outside, she sees that a police team is heading to the school, and she decides to go with them. She enters the basement and asks Holder what this place is. Holder explains it's where the students hold the real Halloween party. They discover a bed with bloodstains on it. Sarah and the forensic team begin searching the room. Oakes shows up, and Sarah tells him the blood matches Rosie's. Oakes asks if Rosie was using drugs, since the basement is often used for drinking and drugs. Sarah tells him they'll have to wait for toxicology results. Oakes decides decides that Sarah will lead the investigation because the mayor's office is monitoring the case closely, and he feels Holder can't handle it alone. He tells her he needs her to stay until the end of the week and promises this will be the last thing he ever asks from her. Then Sarah discovers a hole in the wall opposite the bed and traces it to a small adjoining room. She finds out the school janitor, Rosales, has been using the room to spy on students. Sarah goes to his house and asks his mother about him. The mother says he's not home, and Sarah realizes Rosales' father is blind. She decides to have Holder distract the family while she searches the house. Suddenly, Rosales appears and tries to attack her. Sarah calls for Holder, and he pulls his gun on Rosales, warning him to stay back. Sarah tells him they just want to talk, but something unexpected happens. Rosales suddenly decides to take his own life and throws himself out the window. He's rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Holder joins Sarah while she's treating the wound Rosales caused on her hand. He tells her Rosales has a criminal record for crimes against children, and the school administration didn't know about it, which is why he fled. Sarah asks him whether Rosales ran away because of that, or because he killed Rosie. Holder says Rosales has an alibi for Friday. He was arrested at 9:30 p.m. for driving under the influence and spent the entire weekend in jail. Meanwhile, Darren goes to see Adams, who tells him the election is over for him now, that the news broke about Darren's campaign being connected to Rosie's case. He advises Darren to step down and run again next term, promising his support. Darren refuses, saying he won't let developers control the city for another 4 years. As Darren leaves, Adams tells him the police would never hide information like this from him. Darren goes to confront Sarah, accusing her because he kept his promise, and yet the press still talked about the case. Sarah insists she had nothing to do with the leak. Darren says his campaign is crumbling because of this and demands she arrest the suspect so the case can be closed. Sarah arrives at the hospital and goes in to question Rosales after he partially regains consciousness. She tells him they know he was spying on students in the basement and asks him to cooperate. She asks if he saw Rosie there on Friday, and Rosales signals that he did. She then asks if he saw Jasper with her, and Rosales signals that he actually saw Chris with her. A doctor walks in and tells Sarah he's in critical condition and she can't keep questioning him. Before Sarah leaves, Rosales says one word: the Diplo. Sarah doesn't understand what he means. Holder gathers all the information about Chris and discovers he's a drug addict, expelled from school, and his mother filed a report saying he ran away. Most importantly, he's Jasper's best friend. Before he leaves, Sarah shows Holder a video from the party and points out that Chris entered wearing a mask to hide his identity. She remembers Rosales' word, the Diplo. Sarah and Holder go to follow Chris. Holder approaches him and tries to intimidate him, but Chris stays calm and tells him he knows his rights. Sarah asks if he gave Rosie drugs at the party. He denies it, and Sarah tells Holder to back off. Sarah keeps watching Chris and sees him meet Jasper. Chris is furious because the police found out he was at the party, and he tries to attack Jasper. Jasper defends himself, insisting he never told anyone anything. Holder doesn't understand why Chris hates Jasper so much if they're friends. Sarah realizes Rosie would never go to the basement alone with Chris. She'd only go with someone she trusted, like Jasper. Holder suggests they arrest Jasper, but Sarah insists they don't have enough evidence. Sarah and Holder return to the station where Oakes tells them a teacher confiscated a student's phone and found a video that had been forwarded to almost everyone at school. Oakes plays it, and Sarah is shocked when she sees Jasper wearing a devil mask and assaulting Rosie, with Chris present in the room. Oakes orders Holder to arrest both of them. Chris is detained and starts panicking from withdrawal symptoms, begging for help. Sarah and Holder go in to interrogate him. Chris insists he didn't hurt Rosie. Holder plays the video from the party, and Sarah tells Chris to tell Rosie he didn't kill her. Later, Jasper arrives with his lawyer. Sarah tells them Jasper must be nervous since his father isn't with him this time. She tells them they found a video of someone assaulting Rosie. The lawyer tells Jasper not to respond to anything. Sarah plays the video showing Jasper in the devil mask. Jasper panics and insists the situation isn't what it looks like. Meanwhile, Sarah questions Sterling and asks why she went into the basement with Jasper, dressed as a witch, just like Rosie, and about the blood in the room. Sterling says she was drunk and wore the witch costume because they were fooling around. The blood was hers, since she always gets nosebleeds. Sarah asks about her relationship with Rosie. Sterling says they were close, but Rosie changed after breaking up with Jasper. She used to lie to her mother, claiming she was at Sterling's house, when in reality she would take bus 108 after school. Holder walks in, surprised Sterling would go to the basement with the boy who used to date her best friend. Sterling breaks down. saying she went because Jasper was kind to her, and that rarely happened when Rosie was around. Rosie always got everyone's attention. Meanwhile, Mitch goes to Rosie's school and meets Mr. Bennett. He tells her Rosie was a kind, smart student who always asked questions. Sarah goes to Stanley's house and asks him to let her search Rosie's room again. She checks the pillows and the bed and begins to suspect Rosie was secretly seeing someone, taking bus 108 to meet him. Holder takes bus 108 and arrives at a neighborhood mostly populated by African Americans, realizing Rosie always went there with Bennett. Sarah returns to Rosie's room, exhausted, and finally discovers Rosie hid letters inside the globe on her desk. When Sarah reads the letters, she realizes they're from Bennett. Sarah and Holder go confront Bennett and ask why he never mentioned Rosie met him after school and went with him to the field. Bennett says it only happened once or twice. Sarah asks if he ever drove one of Darren's campaign vehicles since he supported Darren. Bennett is shocked. They're accusing him of being involved in Rosie's murder. Sarah asks Bennett to cooperate with them so they can clear his name, but Bennett insists the campaign only gave volunteer badges to all the students, and he never used any of their cars. Holder asks where he was on Friday during Rosie's murder. Bennett says he was at home, but unfortunately, he can't prove it because his wife has been staying at her sister's house for a week. He's been repainting the floor, and the fumes bother her. Sarah confronts him about the letters he exchanged with Rosie. Bennett explains that she wrote to him, and he replied to her in an intellectual way, like they were discussing ideas, because she didn't like speaking in class. Unfortunately, he didn't keep any of her messages. He insists she was a smart girl and that he was simply helping her explore the world and find her voice. He gives them a short film that she directed. Sarah and Holder watch the film together. Sarah realizes Rosie saw something she wasn't supposed to see, but Holder thinks Bennett is manipulating them with the film and just buying time. He decides to call the painting company to verify Bennett's story. Later, Sarah books plane tickets for herself and Jack for their move with Rick. At that moment, she sees Holder stepping out of a very expensive car. She follows him inside and is shocked when she sees him counting a large amount of money. Holder hides the money and tells her he contacted the paint company. Sarah asks if the money is from gambling. Holder answers he won it playing cards. He then tells her the paint company confirmed that Bennett called them on Friday and asked them not to come. Holder is convinced Bennett is lying about everything, including the film. Sarah clearly doesn't trust Holder after seeing the money. Sarah and Holder drive to Bennett's house and meet his wife, Amber. She seems extremely loyal to Bennett and tells them that when she was in her senior year, Bennett was a 23-year-old recent graduate, and that's how they met and started dating. Sarah asks to use the bathroom. Inside, she sees Bennett preparing a baby's room and using a strong chemical. She suspects he used that same cleaner to erase evidence from the crime scene. Meanwhile, Holder asks Amber again where Bennett was Friday night. Amber says he came home at 10, called her from the house, and told her he was home. Holder asks if he called from the landline. Amber says no, it was from his cell phone. Sarah receives the medical report. Her assistant tells her there are traces of the same chemical found in Bennett's house on Rosie's body. Sarah asks what the chemical is used for. The assistant explains it can be used for cleaning, painting, and even in making explosives. He believes the murderer may have used it to destroy evidence under Rosie's fingernails. He says the killer is clearly experienced and has probably done this before. Meanwhile, Darren takes a photo with his supporters, and Bennett is among them. Their relationship seems very strong. Back at the office, Sarah's friend Reggie arrives with breakfast. Since Sarah didn't come home the night before, she asks about the flight. Sarah says she's leaving tonight and tries to reassure her that Jack will be fine. Reggie tells her Jack is just like her, pretending to be tougher than he really is. Then Jack walks in, and Sarah tells him to pack because they're traveling tonight. Jack asks if they can wait so he can go to his friend's party tomorrow. Sarah says that's impossible because their flight is at 11:20. Jack bets she'll miss the flight. Sarah bets $50 million that she won't. Before leaving, Reggie reminds Sarah she almost lost Jack once and warns her not to let it happen again. Sarah and Holder go to talk to Bennett's neighbors. The first neighbor says she's been there 16 years and that Amber is pregnant. Holder calls Sarah over quickly. A neighbor tells them he saw Bennett enter the house with a girl on Friday around 10 p.m. Sarah shows him Rosie's photo and he confirms she's the girl he saw. Sarah and Holder go up to Bennett's apartment and ask if Rosie was there last Friday. Bennett apologizes and admits she came by to return a book she borrowed. Sarah points out this is the second time he hides an important detail. Bennett insists it was a short visit and he simply forgot. Sarah tries to enter the apartment to search for the book, but Bennett stops her and demands a search warrant. He tells them they have to leave because he has to attend the funeral. Sarah goes to the church and sees Rosie's family and friends at the funeral. After the ceremony, she calls Holder and tells him Bennett appears in the party video at 11:20 p.m., which means he didn't let Rosie into the basement. She asks Holder to verify Amber's location, even though she claimed she was at her sister's. Darren arrives at the funeral to offer his respects. Sarah tells him Rosie's family doesn't want strangers there. Darren asks if she suspects Bennett since he knows she's investigating him. Sarah refuses to tell him anything and walks away. Rosie's family says goodbye, and her little brother throws a map into the grave so she can find her way to them in heaven. Mitch breaks down completely. During the reception, Jasper's father arrives to give his condolences. Terry reaches out to shake his hand, but he ignores her. It's clear they know each other. At that moment, a police officer calls Belko, Stanley's friend, and tells him Bennett is now the prime suspect in Rosie's murder. Belko rushes to tell Stanley. At that moment, Sarah finds another one of Bennett's neighbors who uses a telescope to watch the neighborhood. The neighbor tells her he saw Bennett with Rosie in the house, but couldn't tell what was happening because it was raining heavily. Later, he saw Bennett leaving the house with a woman, and they were carrying something wrapped in a blanket. Sarah and Holder go to Bennett's house again, and Sarah suspects Amber helped him dump the body. Sarah knocks, but Amber refuses to open the door and looks terrified. As they walk away to go arrest Bennett, Holder tells Sarah he knows Stanley used to work for the Polish mob and once killed someone, but that was years ago. Sarah gets angry because he hid that from her and tells him to call Bennett immediately. Meanwhile, Stanley offers Bennett a ride. Holder tries calling Bennett, but Bennett forgot his phone. At the same time, Darren faces Adams in a debate and publicly accuses him of being backed by a teacher who is now a murder suspect. Sarah arrives at Stanley's house and discovers he left with Bennett. She gets worried and tells Holder to wait there while she goes to Bennett's house. Stanley drives Bennett to a remote location and asks him to get out of the car. Bennett starts feeling uneasy and reaches for his phone only to realize he left it behind. Meanwhile, Sarah arrives at Bennett's house and calls out to Amber. Amber finally opens the door, annoyed, and asks why Sarah keeps harassing them. Sarah asks where Bennett is. Amber says he went to the funeral and she's waiting for him to call her so she can pick him up. Sarah asks her to call him immediately. Back in the woods, Stanley pulls Bennett out of the car and starts talking to him about Rosie, telling him that if he had a daughter, he'd understand what he's going through. Bennett insists he would never hurt Rosie. He's about to become a father himself. Sarah continues talking to Amber, who insists Bennett is kind, loves his students, and always wants to help everyone. Sarah asks why Amber went to the Halloween party on Friday. Amber says she felt jealous, thinking Bennett might be looking at all the girls with perfect bodies there. The pregnancy has made her emotional, and she tells Sarah she miscarried last year and physically can't lift or carry anything. Bennett arrives home and angrily asks Sarah what she's doing there, accusing her of almost ruining his life. He tells her if she wants to ask anything else, she should speak to his lawyer. Sarah leaves Bennett's house and realizes it's almost time for her flight. She rushes to the airport with Jack, running to the gate, but the airline agent informs her the plane has already closed its doors. Sarah tries explaining she's a detective and needs to make it to her own wedding reception, but the employee tells her there's nothing she can do. Sarah and Jack leave the airport, and Jack reminds her she owes him $50 million. The next day, Sarah calls Holder and asks about the search warrant for Bennett's house. Holder tells her Oakes canceled it because information leaked from the office, and now everyone knows Bennett is a suspect. He assumes Sarah already left and is taking a break while he's stuck handling everything. Sarah storms into Oakes' office and demands to know why he canceled the warrant. He tells her the witness who said he saw Bennett carrying a rolled-up carpet is now in a psychiatric facility. Sarah argues Amber couldn't physically carry anything because of her medical condition. She believes the person who helped Bennett was his friend Mohammed, who was always at Bennett's house. She argues that if they arrest Mohammed, they can pressure Bennett. Before leaving, she also tells Oakes that Stanley used to work with gangs, and maybe they murdered Rosie as revenge if he owed them money. Holder walks in shocked to see Sarah is still in the city. Oakes tells her if she wants a warrant, she needs stronger evidence than a mentally ill witness and gang speculation. Sarah and Holder go to the mosque where Bennett teaches Quran with Mohammed. They meet the imam and ask him about Mohammed, explaining it's related to Rosie's case. The imam tells them a girl named Aisha is missing too, and her case is no less important than Rosie's. He says a whole week has passed and the police haven't helped. Sarah insists she never heard about the case. The imam says he feels sorry for Rosie's family, but at the moment he's busy with Aisha's case. He also tells them that if they want Mohammed, they should come during prayer time. There will be 40 men with the same name. That night, Sarah and Holder break into Mohammed's butcher shop. Holder breaks the lock, but just as they start searching for evidence, federal agents arrive and arrest them, assuming they're suspects. Sarah then realizes the room they entered belongs to a child. The federal agent then releases them. Outside, Oakes confronts them angrily for breaking into a locked place without a warrant and tells them the FBI is now investigating a terrorism case. Sarah tries to tell him she believes that was the room where Rosie was held. Oakes tells her the place is now federal jurisdiction. The next day, Sarah arrives at her office and finds the FBI there. They tell her Oakes authorized them to take Rosie's case files. Oakes calls her into his office and scolds her because case photos were leaked to the press. He tells her this is the third time confidential information has been leaked. Sarah begins to suspect Holder and asks Oakes how someone with a history of addiction like Holder got transferred from county police into homicide. Oakes says someone with influence recommended him. Sarah returns to Oakes's office and tries to convince him to give her the case back, telling him she found Rosie's shirt in Mohammed's butcher shop. Oakes tells her the case is now in FBI hands because it has become connected to a terrorism investigation and orders her to get ready to leave town. Sarah walks away upset, but suddenly notices Holder getting into a car with a strange-looking man, so she decides to follow them. She tracks Holder to a building and realizes the man is his friend Jill, the same person who helped him through rehab. Holder starts talking about his sister, how she always stood by him, and how his nephew once had to steal something valuable from him when he was still an addict. Sarah begins to sympathize with him. At that moment, her phone rings, and she steps outside to answer. Holder notices she's there. Sarah takes the call and is shocked. It's a parent from Jack's school complaining that Jack keeps sending scary pictures of the murdered girl to classmates. He sent those photos to both her son and the other kids. Later that night, Holder meets Sarah and tells her he managed to tap Bennett's phone. If they find anything, they can convince the judge to return the case to them. Holder tells Sarah he knows Judge Elliott from when he was still an addict, and they've been close ever since. Sarah tells him not to tell Oakes, and Holder says that's exactly who he really is. He suggests they stake out Bennett together. Meanwhile, Amber overhears Bennett talking to Mohammed and saying that the passports will be ready tomorrow. Holder gets the recording, and they bring in a translator. They learn Bennett is telling Mohammed that the police don't know anything yet, but someone tipped them off about the room and found out the girl had been there. Mohammed tells him to calm down and promises no one will get to him. Bennett says the passports will arrive tomorrow and tells Mohammed to call him when they do so. All of this can end. Sarah orders 2 officers to keep surveillance on Bennett's house until they have an arrest warrant. She goes back to her office and starts searching Rosie's things. She finds a paper with the name Adela on it and shows it to Holder. He tells her it isn't one of Rosie's friends. It's a strange name. Amber then shows up and tells Sarah she came to give them information. Sarah reassures her they know she loves her husband, and if she helps them, they can help him. Amber gives them Mohammed's number and says she suspects Bennett is involved in something with him. Bennett arrives at the school and insists on entering the classroom despite the principal's warnings. He tells his students he knows what's being said about him, and if anyone has any questions, they should ask him. The students walk out and leave the words murderer written on the board. Meanwhile, Darren visits the mosque and tells the imam he came immediately when he heard they were being harassed. The imam tells him Muslim kids are afraid to go to school, and a shop owner was robbed because of the case. Darren promises to support them even if he loses the election. The imam tells him that Adam said the same thing once, and in the end, the government never protected them. Sarah tracks Mohammed using the phone number. When Mohammed realizes she spotted him, he runs. Holder catches him and they arrest him. Mohammed starts reciting prayers out of fear. At the station, Oakes tells them to interrogate him quickly because he can't stall the FBI much longer. Holder tells Sarah they have nothing on Mohammed. He has no criminal record. They start questioning Mohammed. After enough pressure, he finally talks. He admits he was at Bennett's house Friday night and he opened the door for the girl. He says Bennett didn't want her there, but Mohammed convinced him they needed to take her to the butcher shop because she was scared and crying. When people found out where she was, they moved her before the police arrived. He tells them the girl is safe and they're sending her to Canada so her family can't reach her. Sarah and Holder are stunned. They show Mohammed Rosie's picture and ask if that's the girl he's talking about. Mohammed says he's talking about Aisha and that Rosie did come to the house, but she just dropped off a book and left. He was helping Aisha because her family was forcing her into marriage. Sarah and Holder take Mohammed to see Aisha to confirm his story. On the way, Sarah gets a call that Bennett is missing. missing. Meanwhile, Stanley and Belko have kidnapped Bennett and taken him to a remote location. Bennett tries to explain he had nothing to do with Rosie's murder and that he was only helping a girl named Aisha, whose family was trying to force her into marriage. Back with Sarah and Holder, Aisha opens the door. They verify Mohammed's story and immediately call it in. Bennett is unconscious from the beating. They return to Oaks and report that Mohammed has been released because he's no longer a suspect. It turns out the girl at the butcher shop wasn't Rosie. Oaks loses his temper and tells them Bennett is in the hospital in critical condition. Sarah goes to her office and blames herself because she was the one who told Stanley's family Bennett was a suspect, and she knows they're involved in the assault. Holder tries to reassure her that it's not their fault. Bennett lied and hid information from them from the start. Sarah gets a call saying Stanley turned himself in. The next day, Sarah decides to visit Stanley and asks about his past with the mob and the gambling that might have led someone to target his family. Stanley insists that was years ago. Sarah tells him she knows he was the one who called the ambulance for Bennett. Stanley asks about Bennett, and Sarah tells him he's alive, but in critical condition. Sarah and Holder return to Stanley's house and question Terry, who tells Sarah that the only person besides the family with a key is Belko because he lives in the garage. She speaks poorly of him and says he has no personality. Meanwhile, Holder questions Belko, who says Stanley never lets him into the house when they're not home. He says he was with his mother Friday night. They go to Belko's mother's house, and she confirms he was there. When they enter Belko's room, they're shocked to find photos of Stanley's family pinned above his bed. They arrest him and charge him with Rosie's murder. When Sarah accuses him of trying to get close to Rosie, he breaks down. He confesses that he was in Stanley's house on Friday night. When he didn't see Rosie, he turned off all the lights because Stanley never allowed him in the house. Belko explains he loved sneaking in, making coffee, and pretending it was his home because he grew up without a family. He also says he heard Rosie talking on the phone with someone named Adela and telling her she was coming downstairs to meet her. Sarah steps outside and tells Holder she believes Belko because Rosie left a note with the name Adela and wrote beside it, Friday, 11:45 p.m. Holder tells her he's going home because he hasn't slept in 50 hours and tells Sarah she should try sleeping too. The next morning, Sarah goes for a run near the port and sees a yacht called Adela. She takes a ferry and spots a sign for a casino called Whoppy Eagle, showing the same logo as the keys found with Rosie. She goes there and confronts the manager about Rosie. The manager claims they don't allow minors inside. When Sarah notices the manager and security officer contradicting each other, she asks to speak with the customers. The manager gets aggressive and says they are not under city jurisdiction, and unless Sarah has a federal warrant, she must leave. Sarah calls Holder and tells him everything. She suspects the casino is involved because the manager and her assistant are covering for each other, and Rosie had a set of keys with the casino's symbol on them. Sarah goes home and discovers Jack left his phone and hasn't been home. She gets a call from the school and learns Jack has been skipping class for 3 days. Sarah starts searching for him, and Holder joins her. They check a place called The Tunnel, where teens hang out, but Jack isn't there. Holder suggests Reggie might have taken him on a boat trip. Sarah tells him Reggie was her social worker when she was raised in foster care, and she would never take Jack without telling her. Holder accesses Jack's phone, and they discover texts from a stranger asking to meet. Sarah suspects kidnapping and calls the police. She keeps searching the entire city. That night, she hears a police radio report saying a 13-year-old boy's body was found matching Jack's description. Sarah panics and rushes to the scene. She breaks down when she arrives and tries to go to the body, but Holder stops her. Then they hear an update. The victim is a boy named Daniel. Sarah returns to her hotel and finds Jack dancing in the hallway. Holder tells her to punish him for putting her through that. When Holder leaves, he gets a call saying the ATM surveillance footage from outside the casino has arrived. Holder reviews the video and sees Rosie at the casino. Sarah joins him, and Holder shows her that Rosie was depositing money every week, over $7,000 total. The account isn't in her name. They go to Stanley's house and question Terry because the account is registered under her name. Terry admits she gave Rosie her ID so she could enter the casino. Holder scolds her for allowing a teenager to gamble. Terry says Rosie was 17 and her mother was strict, so she helped her enjoy life. Later, Holder meets his undercover friend Cammie and introduces her to Sarah. They ask her about the casino and show her Rosie's picture. Cammie says she hasn't seen Rosie, but lots of girls her age work there and get exploited. Holder asks if those girls are abused. Cammy says one girl last summer was found beaten badly, 20 stitches and a broken rib. They discover Rosie signed in to a dating site and find a girl wearing the same shoes Rosie was wearing the day she died. It's Terry. When they confront her, she explains she used the site to meet rich men she could never meet in real life. Sarah shocks her by revealing Rosie used her laptop to log into the website 3 days before she died. They ask if Terry's clients were violent. Terry tells them a friend named Celine posted a message saying the man she was with shoved her into a pool and asked how it felt to drown. Sarah and Holder trace the account of the man who attacked the girl. They discover he deleted the account on the day Rosie died, and his username was Orpheus. Holder meets Celine and pretends to be a client, trying to learn who attacked her. Celine avoids answering and says clients never reveal their identity. Holder is convinced she's hiding something and suspects the culprit is businessman Tom Drexler, a major donor to Darren's campaign. Celine becomes scared and tells him if he wants to arrest her, he should, or let her go. Holder walks away, and Celine calls him back and tells him she needs protection before she talks. Sarah goes to Darren's house and asks him about Tom. He gets a phone call and steps away to answer it. Sarah's assistant calls and tells her the message she sent to Orpheus, the one saying she knows what he did, was delivered and opened. Sarah tells him to send the email again. Suddenly, she hears a notification sound from Darren's computer. She checks and discovers the messages are being delivered to his email. Meanwhile, Holder arrives at the location Celine described so he can meet the man who attacked her. He's shocked when he sees photos of Darren everywhere. Darren walks in and asks Sarah what she's doing. Sarah tells him she discovered he is Orpheus. Darren explains that Orpheus is a Greek poet who lost his wife and descended into the underworld to bring her back. The only condition was that he couldn't look back, but he did, and he lost her forever. Holder calls Sarah and tells her Celine identified Darren and he's on his way. Sarah tells Darren her partner is coming and manages to leave the house terrified. Outside, Holder meets her and confirms she's safe. He suggests they go back and arrest him, but Sarah says they can't until they know what his connection to Rosie is. Sarah and Holder return to the car used in the murder and discover the tank was filled on Friday, which means Darren stopped at a gas station before the murder. They decide to review surveillance cameras from gas stations in the area. They go to a nearby gas station and ask the owner. He tells them a black car was there on Friday, and what caught his attention was the man leaving in a hurry because the girl with him was yelling. Sarah asks if he saw the man's face, but he says he didn't. He left the money and drove off fast. Sarah discovers the station has a back door leading straight into the park, and she begins to suspect Rosie ran through it. Sarah, Holder, and a search team sweep the park because they believe Darren was chasing Rosie there. That night, they find Rosie's shoes. Sarah tells Holder that if Rosie had run the other way, she could have escaped. Sarah confronts Darren and accuses him of exploiting women and girls to replace the wife he lost. Darren explodes and tells her not to talk about Lily, because for 2 weeks she has been destroying his campaign and everything he's built, just when he was finally close to winning. He insists he didn't do anything to Rosie. At that moment, Gwen has been listening. When Sarah leaves, Gwen tells her that on Friday, Darren left the camping trip and told her he needed time away from the campaign. He returned at dawn soaked and drenched. Sarah goes to Oaks and begs him for a warrant to arrest Darren. She says his girlfriend just confirmed he wasn't with her Friday night. Oaks refuses and says it's not enough evidence. Holder walks in and shows him footage from the traffic cameras proving Darren was driving the car where Rosie's body was found. Sarah goes to Darren's rally and arrests him for Rosie's murder in front of his supporters. The news spreads quickly. We see Belko loading a gun, ready to avenge Rosie. On the plane, Sarah receives a call and learns the cameras Holder used to prove Darren was in the car had been broken for months. Sarah realizes Holder had been misleading her the whole time and working for Adams to destroy his political rival, especially since minorities were supporting Darren. Sarah is shocked when she realizes the entire Rosie Larsen case was nothing but a political game, and the true victims were Rosie and her family, who were torn apart. The season ends.